I declare the ordinary council meeting of the 23rd of November 2021, held in council chambers at the City of Subiaco, open at 5:32 p.m. I welcome councillors, staff and members of the community. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. Please note this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. Recordings will be made available following the meeting, and confidential sections of council meetings will not be live streamed or recorded. Okay, that brings us to attendances, apologies and leave of absence. There doesn't appear to be any apologies. Does anyone have an application for a leave of absence to submit tonight? No? Okay, item 3, disclosure of interests. Are there any disclosures of interest? I think Councillor Jennings, I saw your hand up. Go up first.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 2 disclosures. I, Lynette Jennings, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 23 November 2021, agenda item C20, report of the inquiry into the City of Subiaco. It's an impartiality interest. The nature of my interest is in the authorised inquiry report I am mentioned either by name, indirectly, as part of council, or where the title elected members is used, and the latter may be intended to refer to me. Some of those references involve negative or adverse comment, opinion or implication, which I've challenged and sought to correct in my written response to the draft inquiry report, with the only corrections made in the final report that I could identify concerning ward numbers, number of councillors elected in 2019 and a few dates. Signed by me. Then the second one is I, Lynette Jennings, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 23 November 2021, agenda item C5, draft local development plan for the Seddon Street Precinct. The nature of the type of my interest is impartiality, and the nature of my interest is my brother-in-law John Taylor has provided a heritage assessment of buildings in the precinct to the city. I've had no contact with John Taylor in regards to this assessment, this item or related matters. Signed by me. Thanks.
Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you. I have 2 also. First one, I, Angela Hammersley, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 23 November 2021, agenda item C5. The type of interest I wish to declare is proximity pursuant to section 5.60B of the Local Government Act 1995. The nature of my interest is I am the owner of 24 Catherine Street, Subiaco, which property is directly across the road from land which is the subject of the draft local development plan under consideration. And my second one is I, Angela Hammersley, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 23 November 2021, agenda item C20. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to clause 22(2) of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is I was a councillor at the time the events the subject of the inquiry occurred, and I am mentioned by name in the report. Thank you.
Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Mayor McMillan. My first declaration, I, Stephanie Stroud, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on the 23rd of November 21, agenda item C6. The nature of my interest is impartiality pursuant to clause 22(2) of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is as per my disclosure for the agenda briefing on this item. Signed by me. And the second disclosure, I, Stephanie Stroud, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on the 23rd of November 21. Agenda item C20. impartiality pursuant to Clause 22(2) of the Code of Conduct for council members and committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is I am briefly mentioned in the original inquiry report. Signed by me, 23rd of today, the date of today.
Councillor De Vries.
I, Rosemary De Vries, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting on the 23rd of the 11th, 2021, agenda item C6. The nature of my declaration is an impartiality pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is Julie Matheson is a former councillor and is the owner of 139 Coglan Road and is someone I know. The second is I, Rosemary De Vries, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting held on the 23rd of November 2021, agenda item C20. The nature of my interest is impartiality pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is I am mentioned in the original inquiry report, signed and dated the 23rd of November 2021.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. I, Mark George Burns, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 23 November 2021, agenda item C11. Financial interest pursuant to section 5.60A of the Local Government Act 1995. The nature of my interest is possible acquisition of certain adjoining properties on Nicholson Road. As such, I will not be inside the chamber during the item. Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll up the ante to 3 disclosures. The first one is item C6. I, Rick Powell, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by the Council at its meeting on the 23rd of November 2021. Agenda item C6. The nature of my interest is impartiality pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is I believe a former councillor resides at 139 Coglan Road, and as such the person is known to me. For the public record, this will not play any part in my decision making on this application. Next one is I, Rick Powell, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by the Council at this meeting to be held on the 23rd of November 2021, agenda item C7. The nature of my interest is impartiality pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is one of the applicants, Mr Richard Shade, is known to me. For the public record, this will play no part in my decision making. And the third one is I, Rick Powell, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by the Council at its meeting to be held on the 23rd November 2021, agenda item C20. The nature of my interest is impartiality pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is the Council is required to respond to the authorised inquiry report, and I am named in that report. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no one else, I've got an interest to declare. I, Mayor David McMullen, wish to declare an interest in agenda item C6 of tonight's agenda. The type of interest I wish to declare is an impartiality interest. The nature of my interest is that Julie Matheson resides at 139 Coglan Road, being the property referred to in item C6. Okay, there weren't any previous public questions taken on notice, so that'll get us on to item 5, which is public question time. And the first question we've got is from Judith Gadiro of Hensman Road.
Better get the glasses on. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My questions relate to agenda item C11. The majority of focus in addressing the problems of the traffic and parking related to the circus seem to be focused on the northern side of Nicholson Road, which leave the southern side with continuing problems. Question 1. Could consideration be given to painting no parking sign on the footpath or street at the entrance to my carport, or alternatively, continue a yellow no parking line from the end of the one legal parking bay outside the circus to Hensman Road, as is custom and practice in the City of Subiaco? Question 2. Given the non-compliance of vehicle parking on the southern side, would Council consider the installation of a mirror to allow for greater visibility when reversing onto Nicholson Road, not only for my driveway but for all the affected dwellings from the circus to Hensman Road? Thank you for your consideration.
Director, Technical Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. In response to question 1, a continuous yellow no stopping line at this location is included in each of the 6 options provided in the officer report. And in response to question 2, this is a common situation for inner city properties. The city officers do not support the installation of mirrors within the road for this purpose and prefer to ensure sight lines are maintained through suitable parking controls. Thank you.
The next question is from Frank Torrey of Nicholson Road, Shenton Park. Okay, he doesn't look like he's here, so we'll move on to the next question, which is from Helen Leader of Cuthbert Street, Shenton Park.
Good evening, and thank you. My questions refer to the condition of the turf at Rosalie following constant use and exceptionally heavy winter rain, as highlighted by recent letters published in the Post newspaper. Given that A, climate change won't follow any desired pattern, i.e. this year's winter deluges are likely to be repeated, and that B, many different sporting codes use Rosalie, and clearly none of them should suffer because of overuse of the grounds by any of the others. Question 1. How does the city plan to mitigate the obvious effects of overuse on Rosalie Park in both the short and long term? And question 2. Would the city consider requiring bookings to be confirmed by someone who knows the actual conditions of the grounds and then be subject to same-day cancellation by ground staff? Thank you.
Acting Director, Community and Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. In response to your first question, the City holds regular meetings with the Rosalie Park user group, and in that we consider the usage of Rosalie Park. During the recent winter season, we received an above-average amount of rainfall, and we regularly undertake turf improvements and renovations on the grass surface as required. The City will continue to monitor usage and maintenance into the future, and will consider a range of factors, which includes climate change and the ever-changing weather. In response to your second question, officers work flexibly in allocating fields to user groups depending on the current state of the surface at the time, and there are a number of people involved in that.
Wendy Lau of William Street, Shenton Park.
Good evening. My question is, did the Subiaco Council consult a civil engineer before placing a piece of concrete in Nicholson Road outside the Circus Cafe?
Director, Technical Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. The city's civil engineers designed and reviewed the concrete nib that was installed between Whole Foods Circus and Perth Party Hire, and it is a common road design element. Thank you.
Tricia Stedman of Selby Street.
Thank you. We appreciate the initiatives of Monia Allegre resident and Gillian Kings-Lynn, who were the two ladies who approached the council about having an arts hub in Subiaco. We're very grateful for Mayor McMullen for following this up with a motion at tonight's meeting. A group of us decided to get together with artists in Subiaco. We were blown away by the number of artists and art enthusiasts that are keen for the Arts Hub. Our meeting was attended by 38 people, artists in their 20s, 30s, mid-career artists, and even a senior watercolourist who, as he is senior, is finding it difficult to drive across the freeway to South Perth for his art classes. We realise the Arts Hub is very important to all of our community. The group the other night was made up of illustrators, painters, graphic artists, arts administrators, architects and jewellery designers with international acclaim and experience. We even had a local professional facilitator who's offered her expertise to help us tease out the community's priorities. Our group are 100% behind this initiative, and we know and we feel sure that we have the support of the councillors, and we're really, really 100% keen to work with the staff. Like our Subiaco library that grew 100 years ago from a community grassroots initiative, our Arts Hub can build and grow too. We can start simply and end up with a centre that is unique and the piece de resistance of arts hubs in Western Australia. Question: would the council staff please accept our offer to form from our group's midst a cross-generational artist reference group to work alongside in support of the council staff in this huge mission of compiling their report to council, if the motion is passed tonight? Let us progress this wonderful initiative simply, effectively, and soon. We can start small and grow. We are ready to start work with you, the council and the council staff now. Thank you.
Acting Director, Community and Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. Thank you for your question and for your offer. Should the resolution be passed, we are happy to engage with yourselves and a range of stakeholders to progress this initiative. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to section 6 of the agenda, which is public statement time. The first statement submitted was Frank Torre of Nicholson Road, Shenton Park, but unless he's arrived since question time, we'll move on to the next statement, which is from Monia Allegre of Redfern Street, Subiaco.
Here we go. Good evening, everyone. I wish not to repeat what Tricia said, but so I'll try to add a bit of spice since you already read my statement. And I'm going to use the rhetorical figure of a much well-known person in America in a crucial history time. I have a dream today for Subiaco to give to its well-deserved residents a place where creative actions happen every day. I wish for an art hub, a nook where we can all create together and bring much needed essential to life rather than the usual routine, eating, sleeping, working, and add to this cycle, create and entertain ourselves to give a purpose to our life. I feel extremely privileged that the new elected mayor, Mr. McMullen, has expressed his support early on during his campaign, and that he has put already a motion tonight. Thank you for that, and I know some of you are already supportive of the project. So I have a dream, and it already happened at the Unicorn on the 16th of November, when after a whisper on the social media spread quickly, and seeing that so many people were interested in an art hub of any sort could happen in Subiaco, this dream already happened
partially. But I still have a big dream that this hub would be much like the men's shed, but gender neutral and inclusive of all ages, professions, abilities, and disabilities. A place where anyone can come and use the well-equipped workshop that they can't afford or they don't even have the space for, which I'm in that category. So it would be, of course, a place, but there's also a place where we can meet each other and learn from each other. And that's an important thing, because we always, every day, learn from each other. And it's possible, and it would be grand, that it would be, at some point, a bigger formation, starting from small and going bigger. And this actually happens elsewhere in Perth. And the most well-known is the Fremantle Arts Centre, that is actually run by the City of Fremantle. And there's also the Canning Arts Club, the Rockingham Cultural Centre, the Tresillian, run by the City of Netherlands, the Vic Park Arts Centre, Belmont Porters Club. It happens out there, I can assure you.
Ms. Legray, it looks like your allocated time's up, so if you could bring your statement to a close. Thank you.
Touch. The urgency is prime, and the most thing is that we need to start now, and we trust you. That's it. Thank you very much.
James, or rather Jim Crockett of Gloucester Street.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm an elector and a resident of the City of Subiaco, and I thank councillors and staff for the considerable amount of work which has been undertaken to arrive at tonight's recommendation in regard to Nicholson Road Streetscape. I support the revised plan put forward by James Hambley, Director of Planning, which is to be decided by councillors this evening. The revised plan incorporates benefits for all parties and is a safe, workable compromise to an unsafe situation. I wish to draw to councillors' attention only one matter this evening. This relates to the survey response rates. Whilst it shows that 92% of all respondents do want changes to Nicholson Road, it shows that almost 80% of people living in and around the laneway and 42% of residents living within one block did not support making the laneway one way. Once you remove the 39 close residents from the 199 people who wanted the laneway made one way, the 160 who wanted to make the laneway one way lived more than a block away, and there were 31 who didn't even live in the City of Subiaco. They apparently wanted to change a laneway that they'd probably never noticed or indeed driven down. It appears that almost all these 160 people were customers of the Circus coffee shop and were invited to complete the survey by the owners of said coffee shop. Thank you for allowing me to make this statement, and I trust you'll support your planning department this evening, and most importantly, local rate payers in this considered and safer plan for Nicholson Road. Thank you, Mayor.
Martin Lodge of Gloucester Street.
Mayor, councillors, I speak in regard to item C11, Nicholson Road Streetscape. I live at 13 Gloucester Street, and my garage opens onto the right-of-way laneway between Gloucester Street and Nicholson Road. The matter of the laneway and the rights of those of us who use it has been an issue of controversy for some time. The Circus, a successful business on Nicholson Road, has seemed determined to force its alternative view of use of the roads and laneways on those of us who live in the area. This despite there being a well-established existing usage that has served all well, and did so well before the Circus came to town. Nevertheless, a review has occurred, and I commend the City and its officers for the work that has gone into identifying the options. It is important that those of us who are most directly affected have their views heard. The residents of the laneway are that group. There has never been a shortage of parking on Nicholson Road, only a desire of the Circus customers to park as close to the Circus as possible, and often illegally. This has created a safety risk. This illegal parking has increased the safety risk to us residents using the laneway. Fortunately, the City has identified a scheme that deals with the safety, the illegal parking, creates extra parking and maintains the laneway as it is. I therefore urge the Council to follow the recommendation of its officers and vote for option 6. Regrettably, parenting duties require me to leave before I suspect you get to this agenda item. I will get back if I can, though. I urge all to come together. This whole matter has been most unpleasant and unnecessary. Option 6 gives all parties what they want. So let's get it done and let's move forward. Thank you very much.
Claire Smith of Hensman Road.
I too are speaking to regarding agenda item C11 regarding the Nicholson Road streetscape. Thank you for the opportunity to present this statement to Council. My husband and I have lived in Hensman Road for nearly 20 years. During this time, there have been a number of changes to the area, especially the increase of traffic along Nicholson Road. Where there is extra traffic, we believe added consideration should be given to safety and the preservation of sight lines for cars, bikes, pedestrians, etc., using the area and entering onto Nicholson Road, whether from a street or a lane. Considerable amount of work has been undertaken over the past 18 months or so by James Hambley and his department to address the suggested lack of parking on Nicholson Road. Council surveys have shown that there is plenty of street parking on Nicholson Road for residents and for patrons of the local businesses located between Hensman Road and Rosalie Street. Suggestions have been put forward to change the laneway between Nicholson and Gloucester to one way in order to accommodate extra parking. The laneway provides access to residences where the garage is used for parking rather than having to street park. The use of laneways for garage access rather than front-loaded properties is encouraged by the City of Subiaco in its planning documentation. The row in question also provides access for tradespeople, and the Water Corporation often needs to get to the inspection pits. The recent survey shows the majority of residents using the laneway do not support any changes. The revised Nicholson Road streetscape improvement, option 6, is a real opportunity to create a community hub for retail and residents, to increase safety for those people using the lane and for anyone crossing the road. It does provide for some extra parking without restricting residents' use of the row. Landscaping the area presently allocated to no stopping would truly enhance the streetscape, and I, for one, congratulate the City for suggesting a softening of the streetscape, less tarmac, more water-wise vegetation, cooler climate. I consider option 6 to be an answer to a situation that has dragged on for much too long and would commend its adoption. Thank you.
Shelley Lewis of Hensman Road.
Good evening and thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. My statement concerns also agenda item C11. I'm the owner of 142 Hensman Road, which is the heritage-listed corner store on Hensman and Nicholson Roads in Subiaco, currently under restoration. My property is zoned residential home store, and so my home sits behind the original store and runs along Nicholson Road. As there is no street setback to the property, my accommodation is about 4 metres from the no parking area that was suggested for car bays under option 2 of the Nicholson Road streetscape survey. My DA was approved in December of last year, in part because the City was satisfied that there was sufficient parking for my proposed retail business and the existing businesses in the precinct, namely Perth Party Hire, Vintage Cellars and Whole Food Circus. Availability of parking has never been an issue. There are, however, some serious safety and compliance issues near me on Nicholson Road. Large vehicles park every day in the no parking area alongside my place. I have witnessed firsthand the hazard that this creates when crossing Nicholson Road on foot. Now, once reactivated, my shopfront will encourage more foot traffic across Nicholson Road and between businesses. The safety of pedestrian traffic in a village hub is paramount. I thank the City for their consideration of the issues and for their revised proposal, option 6, which is to be commended for the following reasons. Establishing garden in the no parking area addresses the significant non-compliance and safety issues. It softens and cools the public access area adjacent to my property, which, as I mentioned before, has zero setback, so building abuts pavement. The release of 2 additional parking bays on Nicholson Road is a wonderful bonus for residents and shop patrons, and the amenity of owners who use the laneway is preserved. Access from Nicholson Road and Gloucester Street remains. And this is a very important point because this small local centre, and we're talking about 3 businesses and a future 4th, mine, is situated in a broader residential context. The majority of owners who live on the laneway have expressed a strong desire that it remains as is, and I'm one of them, and they have done so with good reason. As owners and residents, we are invested in our community and in its safety. I congratulate the planning team for their work on this matter. Their recommendation of option 6 has my full support. Thank you.
The next statement is from Greg DeLul of Nicholson Road. Now, your statement's a bit longer than everyone else's, sir, so that you don't get cut off, perhaps just keep your eye on the clock and try and get through it as quick as possible.
Thank you. It's accepted that Nicholson Road is the main east-west road through Subiaco Shenton Park. It's the only 2-way road, east-west, which transverses the Perth Fremantle line. This and therefore is one of the major roads through Shenton Park and Subiaco. Its importance will be further enhanced by the development of Shenton Quarter, and there will obviously be significant changes in the traffic because of this major change. I have discussed option 1, but I have not seen option 6, so I'm at a loss here to some extent. I would enhance option 1 because given the inevitable traffic increase by Shenton Quarter development and the natural increase of activity, it means that what it does mean is that exiting from the lane, which currently can go either east or west, is not impeded. But that's the current situation. With a one-way street going through to Gloucester Street, it means that people can't exit from the laneway. In particular, the most dangerous one is when people want to go west. The main, with option 2 and option 3 and option 4, the including of speed humps and the use of the median strip. The median strip is flush, so therefore it's only decorative. It's not a true median strip, and that's one of the defects of that option. And the speed humps do not take into consideration the changes in the guttering near the corner of Hensman Road and Nicholson Road, which have been there for years, that is including the guttering changes and the gap in the median strip, which is to enhance pedestrian traffic. In fact, I've yet to, as I said, I've heard people talk about option 6 and I have not yet seen it. The only comment I will make in those options that I saw is that there is no recognition.
Okay, that's the end of your allocated time, but maybe if you can just take another minute max to wrap things up.
There's no recognition in the options that I've seen for disabled parking and no allowance for designated pedestrian crossing. Thank you.
Thank you. The next statement's from Ian Oldfield of Hay Street, Daglish.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Firstly, I welcome you to the new councillors and Mayor to the council, and look forward to continuing and building on my excellent relationship that I have had with this council over the last 50 years. Believe it or not, it's 50 years. I purchased my first residence in Shetton Park in 1970, and I've been a ratepayer in the city of Subiaco for the last 50 years. So that just puts me at foot there. Now, I'm talking down to on C18, item C18, which is quite a contentious issue tonight, I would think. I request that this item be deferred to allow me to take professional advice on potential alternative options for the future of the car parking area. This is not an unreasonable request, given the long history of this area. There's been a fair amount of submissions and discussions, including at last week's briefing session. The point is that the body corporate, that's we, had a licence agreement with the city for a 3-year licence with 2 3-year options to CPI. The body corporate on the 1st of April 2019 wrote to the city requesting to exercise the first further option for 3 additional years. We sought this extension in good faith. The city's officers made contact with us and the body corporate, and after discussions, the officers, offered 2 by 2 year options as a reduction from 3s, and to retain the CPI and to construct a draft variation, a variation of the agreement. We agreed to that, and that was completed. There remains in my mind some uncertainty of the validity of that deed of variation, which has never been considered by council. I think that was discussed at the briefing session last Tuesday night. My inquiries show that they say that it was a situation where delegated authority was offered to the officers to do this deed of variation. I've yet to see it. I wouldn't mind seeing it or having some proof that it was to validate the agreement. We exercised our intention to extend our original term of 3 years on the 1st of April 19. This would have expired on the 30th September 2022, next year. Business decisions were made by the body corp on the basis of the extensions that we thought would be a formality. DA approvals. It's very important that I discuss this because the land was acquired in 1980, and after several years it was rezoned and approvals were granted to build an office building and a residential component behind.
Take a moment. Yep.
We requested council if we could use the parking area back in 1983. This was granted, and it was offered to us on the basis that we maintain the verge and the parking area, which were in pretty dilapidated state. We spent a lot of money in capital, relawning it, turfing it, putting in ioniser tanks and reticulation and bores, etc., and we've maintained it now for 36 years at our expense. So we're not Johnny-come-latelys. We represent the 4 individual strata owners who have been owner-occupiers, all of them are the original owner-occupiers for the past 36 years. We're long-standing businesses in Subi. If council offers defers this long-standing matter tonight, would grant us further time to consider options that we may meet the needs of your staff and the business in sustainable long-term manner. If that fails, the deferral, you've got 2 other options on the table tonight, option 1 and option 2. Obviously, we would prefer 2 over option 1 because option 1 takes it straight to a public car park. We've been there a long time, we've paid our way, we haven't had any free kicks. It's been the calculation of the cost of the parking 5 years ago and 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago was by the officers of this council, not offered by us. Thank you.
The next section relates to petitions and approved deputations. There's no petitions tonight. So we'll move on to section 8, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. First up is the ordinary council meeting of the 12th of October 2021. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes? Councillor Stroud and Councillor Hammersley. I'll put that to the vote. It's carried unanimously. Next is the special council meeting of the 19th of October 2021. Mover and a seconder for those minutes, please. Councillor De Vries, Councillor Hammersley. Call the vote. It's carried unanimously. Next up, the special council meeting of the 26th of October 2021. Mover and a seconder for those minutes, please. Councillor Burns, Councillor Powell. That's carried unanimously. And finally, the minutes of the special council meeting of the 2nd of November 2021. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kosovich and Councillor Powell. I'll call the vote. And that's been carried unanimously too. Okay, so that brings us to announcements by the presiding member, and just a short one today, and that is to observe that although this is our first ordinary council meeting together as a council, it's been a pretty busy time since the elections on the 16th of October. There's been 3 special council meetings, 5 workshop inductions, mainly for the new councillors, 1 strategic workshop, 1 all-day council planning session, a briefing on a matter relating to sewerage on one of our main streets, an agenda briefing, and now tonight's OCM, or ordinary council meeting. So this is a hard-working council, and like I said at our planning day, it's a council made up of some pretty impressive professional expertise, life experience, and local knowledge. I'm really looking forward to working together, and I think now it's time to make some decisions. So thank you all. Okay, so that brings us to reports of committees and officers. And there's a possible on-block motion in front of me. And it's shown on the screen as well. There's a difference between what's shown on screen and what's in the printed agendas, because items C6 and C7 have been removed, and so has C20. So the proposed on-block motion or resolution is as shown on the screen, and I'd ask if there's any other items that should be withdrawn from the on-block motion. Okay. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. Is item C9, that needs nominations, doesn't it? So doesn't that have to be taken out, or it is out? It's already out, is it?
Yeah, it is out. Yep. So the on-block resolution is as shown on the screen. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the on-block motion? Councillor White. Councillor Burns. I'll call the vote. That's carried unanimously. So for the people in the gallery, what that means is that the items shown on the screen have been carried without debate, and we've saved you and ourselves a whole lot of time. What I might do now is change the order of the agenda slightly to bring forward one of the later items that's on the agenda for tonight, and I'm doing this because two councillors have requested this of me on behalf of some community members. So I think we'll go to item C11. C11 it is, yeah, C11. Obviously that relates to the Nicholson Road streetscape. Has he made that yet? Okay. Councillors, you'll have seen the officer recommendation and no doubt you'll have seen the alternative submitted by Councillor Hammersley, but let's start with the officer recommendation and I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please. You're not moving it, Councillor Jennings? Okay. Is anyone going to move or second the item? Okay, it's going to lapse for want of a mover and a seconder. So let's move straight to Councillor Hammersley's alternative. Councillor Hammersley, I assume you'll move and I'll be looking for a seconder. Councillor De Vries. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you. Now, for the people in the gallery who won't have seen my alternative, I don't think, I'd just like to let them know, so they can follow what we're talking about, that I've proposed an alternate which is based on option 4, which is to include speed plateaus and a pedestrian, it's not actually an official refuge, but a little place where people could step up as they're crossing at the Rosalie Street eastern end plateau, and also some better signage, yellow road markings, and to assist with the non-compliance issues on the southwest area over the driveways. And I've also proposed that we include a resolution to ask for some compliance work to be done in order to encourage a change of behaviour in that southwest area. Hoping it doesn't involve parking fines, because we don't like handing out parking fines. What we'd like to see is a change of behaviour and a focus by our community who uses this local centre on safety and on politeness to the people who live in the area. So, in essence, it's the same as the staff's option 6, but with the addition of the plateaus. Now, that may not be popular with everyone. However, our position here in the council is to look forward and not only consider what the current circumstances is. And what we know is that Ontario Quarter is being built and will continue to be built. And we are seeing development starting on Rockaby Road, and I don't see that abating. So over the years, this is going to become busier and busier. Now, notwithstanding that, we're all being asked to get out of our cars and to start walking and start taking public transport and start living in a very dense inner city suburb we all know we're pretty addicted to our cars. So I felt in the circumstances where I've observed this street intimately for many, many years, as I live just around the corner, I thought it was responsible for us to actually address the safety issues in the way that is proposed. Now, I think the councillors will have read my reasons, and hopefully they'll consider them. I guess it is important to just touch on the laneway, because there are other people in the community who would have liked to see that laneway converted into a one-way. I'm not supportive of that, and the reasons are that this is a local centre. It's designed to service local needs. Now, our state planning documents have been talking about local centres since at least 2010, and the language has not changed. The latest draft of the planning policy that's out for public consultation now still says local centres play an important role in providing walkable access to services and facilities for communities. They're not designed and they're not intended to be mass areas of mass congregation. They're meant to be local. So that's one of my... Oh, that was a quick 5 minutes. Can I have a short extension?
A short extension.
Yes, so that's one of my main reasons. The other reasons is residential amenity, I think, is an important aspect of our life in Subiaco. There's been a lot of focus in the discussions over the months and months that this has been considered about, well, why can't those residents just drive in off Nicholson Road? But I don't think there's been much thought about the fact that if you turn that into a one-way laneway, it means that they have to go off Nicholson Road to get in. They don't have a choice to come in off Gloucester Street. And I think that's an unfair imposition, as is the requirement that they should do 3 turns in either an east or west to get out of their laneway that they've enjoyed for 20, 30 years. So that's basically my feeling, is that we should do landscaping to deal with the compliance problems on the north side. We have challenges, I'm sorry, with the compliance on the south side, but we'll do our best, and I hope that the council will support me. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hammersley. We've got a couple of hard copy proposals of what you're describing, which Mr Millard's going to hand out to the public gallery, and in the meantime, I'll ask Councillor De Vries if you would like to speak to the item.
I'll be quite brief. I think going back to when this was first raised, my principal concerns were for safety. I understand there's complexity around people feeling they've needed more parking for their businesses, but I believe we serve the residents and ratepayers for the short, medium and long term. And as Councillor Hammersley has pointed out, this road will become increasingly busy. And we are just below the threshold where there would have been a recommendation for those safety ramps. They're very low, they're not the big humps, they're the quite low ones, just to reassure you that they're not something that you sort of jump up and bump over. But being just below the threshold, I'm not quite sure, perhaps I can ask that question later, would mean that once Monterio Quarter is completed, there is going to be an increase in traffic. And anybody who's a parent always, holds their breath every time their child goes out on a bicycle and hits the road and off they go to Shenton College. And I am sure nobody will object to there just being a little bit more safety. And I'm quite pleased with Councillor Hammersley coming up with this proposal, which I note is also supported by the officers. So that's a positive. We're not going out on a limb here. We're actually saying, let's protect our community. Let's protect people who are crossing the road who cannot hurry, who cannot, dash and do that, miracle dash. And, you know, God forbid something did happen and we hadn't put those safety measures in place. I just think safety is paramount, and I'm really hoping that other councillors will support it with reservations even. You might feel that more could be done. Well, more can be done in future. But I think we talk about what we can do now, and I think this marries the you know, option 6 and option 4 and puts it into such an easy sort of framework. It keeps the good things in, it keeps the landscaping in, but it adds a little bit more, and of course it adds a little bit more cost. But I think residents, I think if you are happy with option 6, I'm hoping once you've had a look at the proposal and having that little section where you know, young people crossing the road, they've got their school bags on their back, and they can just stand on that and wait for the cars to pass. And people don't always think. You know, we're on the roads, we're going off to work somewhere, we're not thinking. There are 11-year-olds, and we know from the science, people's brains are not fully developed. You know, kids don't use their peripheral vision properly until, I don't know how old, but certainly not when they're in primary school aged, and certainly not when they're on their bicycles. And I would definitely urge all councillors to support this. I think it's the sensible option. And it keeps all the good things in of option 6, which I've heard tonight from the community that you support. So that pretty much winds it up for me. If you have any, you know, I hope councillors will ask questions about it if they feel like there has to be further questions to staff, because I think, you know, I think she covers most of the reasons quite thoroughly. Thank you.
Any other speakers? A question, Councillor Powell.
Yes, look, looking at the plan where the landscaping is next to the substation, does it need to be out to the edge of the road, that landscaping, or could it be taken in, say, a little bit further so that the landscaping's a little bit less? That'll would still stop people illegally parking there, but it would keep the road a little bit wider to allow vehicle passing, especially when there's big vehicles. Could that be, say, reduced by about 300 or so? So it would be more of a silhouette going in. Thank you.
I think that's one for Mr. Hambley.
Thank you, and for you, presiding member. So, in answer to your question, yes, you could. I'd probably advise against it, to be honest, for the reasons that we're talking about tonight. As far as that safety improvement to the area, I'd recommend narrowing the lanes down to what is already a fairly generous allocation, catering for what is already existing, quite a high number of heavy vehicles, in addition to the bus routes. So, what we've designed here suits that, while also tries to keep it as tight as functional and practical, for some safety reasons as well. So I'd suggest, while you could do it, I would suggest that you keep the curb line as shown on the plans.
Councillor White, was there a question, or are you speaking to the motion? Both? Question. Go for it.
They have been raised earlier in this. I just wanted to, I guess, clarify 2 points, if I may, quickly. One is that this does incorporate improved signage in the southwest corner, in terms of the fact that already there is no parking allowed there, and as far as I understand it, many people don't really notice a lot of those signs or markings, and improving that would contribute, I think, significantly to the immediate problem. And the second question, if I'm allowed to squeeze in two in one, is related to the traffic calming, which I support, but just ensuring and confirming that it won't upset any of the public transport or emergency vehicles going through.
Thank you, and for you, presiding member. So you're quite right. It actually should be noted that all the options that were shown did show the no stopping yellow marking being continued at that southwest corner there, where, like you say, we do have some issues with non-compliance with vehicles parking. So that will certainly go some way, I think, to helping that. And additional signage, as Councillor Hamley's alternative suggests, I think would assist that. To your second point, so the plateaus that we're proposing are fully in accordance with what Main Roads and PTA request. So it is a lower profile, so it's not a very abrupt. The reason we use the terminology plateau is because it is a gentler it's a less steep gradient, and it's also a gentler thing, so it's more suitable for buses and the like.
Thank you. This, as I think valuable as this option is, it may not be the answer in the forever. Do we have a sense of where we might be going with this beyond any agreement that's made today? Further consultations? Is there a need for further monitoring of traffic speed? Will there be a need to, we're talking about safety as well as these kind of issues. It seems like it may not all be addressed through this motion today.
I might answer that one. I mean, what we're going to resolve if we carry this is essentially the 3 points that Councillor Hammersley's drafted. So that's going to be the council resolution, and now I'll defer to Mr. Hambley for an answer as to whether that's enough direction and whether it's clear on what officers have to do based on the council decision if made.
Thank you, and for you, Presiding Member. Yes, so I think the council resolution is quite clear. Obviously, if it was to be resolved, we make sure that we notify all the nearby properties and make sure the work's done in the way that causes the least inconvenience to the area. And I guess talking to your other question as far as ongoing, I guess it's probably just worth mentioning that the city is already quite proactive and does assess and review throughout the city both speeds, crash statistics and the like to see, one, to gauge the effectiveness of traffic calming, which on the whole has been very effective in the city, but also pick up any other issues that may arise, whether related to this work or any other changes in the area. So I would say there's nothing else aside from this resolution needed, to be honest.
Yeah, if I could, through the chair, that information, as Emily's described, is integral to our asset management planning process, which forms part of integrated planning, which then forms part of your decision making at budget time in terms of which are the priorities. So it is something that never ends, really.
Councillor Jennings.
This is a question, and yes, I'm supporting all this alternative, except just the query about the extension of the verge on the Vintage Cellars corner on the Rosalie Street side. It does extend out further than staff option, or one of the options which had when there was that central island only, and that took the verge back a bit more. I think that would be option 5, attachment 5. So you have said in your comments that you support the alternative, but I just wanted to double check that because it does narrow the space down once you put that the island in. Thank you.
Thank you, and for you, Presiding Member. So to answer your question, yes, there would likely be some modifications to that corner, because you're quite right that if you have the island, which, as Councillor Hammersley's alternative proposes, takes an element from the median option. So effectively what that would mean is left-turning vehicles out of Rosalie Street, particularly the larger vehicles, would probably need a slightly greater radius to turn. So what we'd probably need to do is modify the corner in keeping with what's shown on the median option. So yes, that's it.
So today, just thank you for that answer through you, Mayor. So today, do we need to resolve that, or that's just an administrative thing that you can tweak?
For you, Presiding Member, I would suggest that it is an administrative matter. I mean, it's really just to facilitate the alternative resolution to make sure that it's a workable option, which on the basis of it entirely is.
Any other speakers? Councillor Powell.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, yeah, I will be supporting this alternative. I am disappointed that we can't do more for the people in the southwest corner of Nicholson Road. I mean, I regularly receive photographs of vehicles illegally parked there, and it's it's not an unusual occurrence. In fact, it's quite frequent, and I would imagine for anybody who regularly has their driveway or their crossover parked on, it would not be a very pleasant thing. But I think I can't see any physical remedy apart from the making it quite clear that it's no parking. I can't see any physical remedy that can be put there to stop it. And I think really, in some ways, we're just paying people are paying the price for poor planning decisions quite a long time ago. This did all start off with the parking, but it did alert us to a problem with safety, and now that problem of safety needs to be addressed because we're aware of it. So I think the proposal as put forward is the best way at the moment we can come up with to address that as well. So I will be supporting the alternative.
Any other speakers? No? Then I'll look to Councillor Hammersley to close. No? Okay, I'll call the vote. Councillor Stroud, if you could vote, please. Okay, that's been carried unanimously. If someone could let Councillor Burns know, please. So it looks like the public galleries worked out that the alternative recommendation's been carried, and Council's just committed $160,000 to fix some of the issues in Nicholson Road. Okay, let's now move back to the top of section 10 of the agenda, and we'll go right back to item AR1, which is in relation to the annual report and audited annual financial statements. There's a recommendation here from the Audit and Risk Committee. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation? Councillor White and Councillor Burns. Councillor White, did you want to speak to the item? Councillor Burns?
I'm sorry. I'm happy to second it.
Okay, I wouldn't want to put you on the spot. Any speakers to the item? Okay, it looks like no one wants to speak, so let's have a vote on that item. And that's carried unanimously. There's only a few people left in the gallery, and I'm sure there's other places they'd like to be, so I might just change the order again. We'll deal with C18 and then move to elected members' motions, and then we'll finish the rest of tonight's agenda. So let's go to item C18, and apologies, councillors, for jumping around a bit tonight. Item C18, of course, relates to car parking station number 16, and I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder for the officer report. Okay, we've got Councillor Hammersley and Councillor Stroud, and I'll just foreshadow that an alternative's also been submitted, and that was submitted by Councillor Burns. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you. I'm aware that we've been asked to consider a deferral. I think I might like to hear from other elected members on that issue, and I'll just keep my mind completely open. But at the moment, I'll just speak to the item as if we are going to make a decision, even though maybe we won't. Look, it's got a complicated history and it's got a long history. I'm not very attracted to the idea of the alternate because I don't think it will take us anywhere that we're not already finding ourselves. It's actually very clear on the documents that there isn't actually an option in the hands of the property owners. What they have is a document that sets out a process by which they can come and ask for another licence period. And there was a formula for how the cost would be calculated. Whatever the internal issues within our own organisation are with how things came to be extended 2 years ago, there's just two things that could happen. Either the deed is not effective, which will push us back to having to make a decision about whether or not there should be an exclusive use licence, and if so, how much it should cost. Or it is effective, and we're here today and we'll still have to make a decision about whether or not there should be an exclusive use licence, and if so, how much it will cost. So that whole issue is a bit of a non-issue when it comes to the substantive dilemma that we have in front of us. We have a changing world. I can see the wisdom of the council in 2016. They set up an agreement which provided a licence and then gave the council, or the city through its council, control of how long that relationship would go on for. Now that makes a lot of sense given where people were sitting in 2016 and what they were looking at coming down the tracks towards Subiaco, and that is massive urbanisation, densification. And since then we've had the LPS 5 experience, and we've had massive change imposed on our community, and it's started. And so it makes a lot of sense that so often we pause and say, what is the right thing for our community? And this is one of those moments, and it's a very difficult one because I feel a lot of sympathy for the people who've enjoyed that car park for all those years. But we have recently had a very unpleasant experience in dealing with King Edward and the needs of the visitors to that hospital and the staff. And this is just going to get worse and worse and worse because it has been decided by, well, I guess you have to say by the community at large, that there will be an increase in population in Subiaco. And that means there will be an increasing fight for parking spots. And the staff have identified that this is a community resource that ought to be available for anybody who can turn up and pay the fee to park there. First come, first, served, whatever. So it's a very difficult decision, weighing up where we are at and what has changed in Subiaco and what is going to change going forward. I'm leaning towards supporting the staff recommendation, but I'm certainly open to listening to the debate, and I think that the question is, if not now, when? Thank you.
Councillor Stroud?
I reserve my right. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other speakers? Councillor Powell?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, to staff. If there is a deferral, or maybe as contemplated in the alternate that legal advice is sought, what would be the effect in the interregnum? While it's in limbo, what would be the effect on that car park? Would we still be receiving revenue? Would we?
Over to you, Manager.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor McMullen, given that the licence agreement has already expired, the car park has actually reverted back to a public car park already. In the interim, it is essentially a public car park. However, the existing signage is consistent with the exclusive use arrangement that was previously in place with the owners. So, subject to Council's decision tonight, and we're also open-minded about that, we would look to implement the parking controls contained in the report. But until that time, if we get to that point, the existing signage is still in place, and that's consistent with the exclusive use arrangement. Thank you.
So sorry, just to clarify, so the existing arrangements would just continue until there is a decision?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McMullen, we're not collecting any revenue from the car park because there are no ticket machines in place at the moment, and we're not collecting any revenue pursuant to the existing or the former licence agreement because that's now expired. So we're not collecting any revenue at the moment in respect of the car park, and that will continue to be the case until Council makes a decision to either implement the parking controls or grant a new exclusive licence. Thank you.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. A question through the chair, if I may. It's really a follow-up on the previous question. As I took the answer to be that the statement was made that considering that the licence had expired, and that was made with some, I'd say, strict definition, I'd question that that's actually not the case if on the documents, because there is a plethora of questions with regards to how the deed of variation took place. I'm not going to go through them all right now. If we get to my amendment, they can be discussed there. I hope that would be very brief. Really what we're looking here is, as the Speaker, Mr Oldfield, said, we're talking about 3 decades against 30 days, probably roughly 30 days before the next council meeting. Any legal opinion would be I'd be surprised if it was more than 2 pages. I just can't see how we, and I'm getting to a question, right? I can't see how we proceed without absolute knowledge, because it's fraught with danger. But going back to what you've said, when you say to us, it has expired, period, right? Could you explain to me, if you can, right, how I don't need to be concerned, or my fellow councillors need to be concerned, that there's any question that it's expired when we have no understanding of how the deed of variation truly occurred, and its terms are absolutely extraordinary to me, right? But the staff just say, that's it, it's done, and even within your, not yours, but whoever wrote it, comments as to my amendment, it talks about even if it's not expired, it's almost like who cares? The best thing is just to proceed anyway. So are you willing to stick with, I'm really asking you, are you willing to say that your statement of this just flat out, it's expired, is arguably not correct, that you know what I mean, or you're just, you know what I mean, that's it as far as the council's concerned and everybody, you know what I mean. I'm just giving you a chance to retract, I suppose, that there are questions to be answered here, that it is just not flat out, the deed of variation's fine, it was signed correctly, everything's fine, and as I said, it's expired, so the car park's ours and we should change the signs. Okay, so that my question is, would you consider an alteration to your previous statement?
Mr. Guest.
Through you, presiding member, Director Hawkins will just make a comment first and then the manager might want to add. The question we were asked is, what's the status if council doesn't make a decision in terms of, and I'll put it simply, option 1 or option 2, what would happen in relation to the car park? We have no agreement.
Sorry, Mr. Hawkins, I understood the question to be, do staff stand by the statement that was made earlier that that the deed of variation, or rather the licence agreement as varied, has expired? That's essentially the question? Yep, okay.
Through you, presiding member, that was what I was coming to. So in response to that, what we've said is that the option was an exercise under the deed of variation, I'm adding those words, and that variation in terms of has expired, and therefore we would not be getting any rent in relation to that arrangement, and we wouldn't be implementing any parking in relation to the other option until such time as council makes a decision. So unless you want to add more.
Yes, thank you for the question. I believe I do understand the question. Through you, Mayor McMullen, and just to add to Director Hawkins' comments, the expiration date of the deed of variation was the 30th of September 2021, and obviously that date has lapsed. So when we talk about expiry, it's on the basis that that date has passed. But to the point about whether or not the deed of variation was validly executed, or whether it is indeed valid at all, look, I'm unable to give you legal advice, but my position on that is the deed of variation was executed under the delegations given to the CEO at the time. The common seal was affixed to it. We've checked the delegations manual as it applied at the time, and indeed the CEO had the delegation to affix the common seal at the time. And if I go a step further and say, well, okay, even assuming it wasn't executed correctly, the parties have still proceeded on the basis of the terms contained in the deed of variation. So, for example, the licence fee that's been paid by the owners is consistent with the reduced fee contained in the deed of variation. So what you could say in that case is, even in the absence of a signed agreement, there is an agreement by conduct, because the parties' conduct suggests that there is an agreement in place. But if I go even a step further and say, okay, even assuming the deed of variation is invalid entirely, either because it was not signed correctly or because there is no agreement by conduct, then my question would be, what is the significance of that? And I think part of the significance is that the licence fee that the owners have paid for the last 2 years has been on the basis of the reduced licence fee of about $25,000, as opposed to the original licence fee, which would have gone up to about $54,000. So we would need to calculate the difference between the two and invoice the owners retrospectively based on the last couple of years. So I guess I've extrapolated a little bit because I'm trying to understand the significance of your question and where that ultimately gets us. And I'm not sure that it really affects the decision before council tonight. It still seems to me to be a relatively binary decision about whether it reverts to a public car park and we implement parking controls, or we grant a new exclusive licence, and that's a decision of council. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Okay, so we've had some long questions and some long answers. If there's a follow-up question that you can frame in about 30 seconds, we'll do it. Otherwise, we'll hear you debate in your allocated 5 minutes, Councillor.
I must, look, I thank you, but I must take your answer as the opposite to your first one, which was flat out, it's expired, because it was, if this happened, if this happened, if this happened, or that happened, if that happened, or that happened, there's all these possibilities, but it doesn't matter, we still come to the same conclusion, right? Well, that's exactly why I want it examined. So you've answered the question by a plethora of possibilities. I'm sorry to put it to you this way, and I don't question your good intentions, but by stating different scenarios, you're actually giving me the answer to my first question was, are you absolutely certain? Well, you're only certain because you can see multiple ways to invalidate it, which goes against a lot of the documents, but we can deal with that if we get to my amendment, my alternative.
Yep. Okay, well, I think we've finished with questions, so if there's no other speakers apart from Councillor Burns, did you want to speak to the item now, or should we call the vote? You want to speak to it? Yep.
Look, I'm going to be very brief because this is either going to receive... I know there's been lots of general discussion between councillors, no discussion of a leading nature, but there has been a lot of talk about it. There's been talk about it also between myself and the CEO and others. The situation to me is this, right? I just can't see how, right? Even though I just can't see how we can proceed with the two alternatives. Firstly, the first one, questions lie over it, whether or not what is the status, which I believe need to be answered. And then if we went for option two is not even set. If we vote option two, it doesn't even set a fixed amount. It doesn't say, well, if option two, we could offer, for instance, the current licence holder a period of this, this period of this amount. The amount's varied, okay? It says that, it uses words like inside the option, at council's discretion, etc. It's not even set out. To even vote that in wouldn't even... I can't see how it would even hold water. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I can't see any way that having a quick look at this with it'll be a very brief opinion, and considering the matter's been going on over 30, well past 30 years, adding 30 days, right? I think it would be imprudent not to hold the matter back and get to a flat out, straight answer that everybody accepts. Thank you.
Okay, question, Councillor Hammersley.
Can I ask the CEO what his position would be with respect to the requests we've heard from the owner's representative tonight with respect to discussions, because we're not really aware of how many discussions have already occurred. But if the CEO could assist with some advice, that would be good.
If I could, through the chair. So there have been discussions in relation to history and context. So that is to be, as the officers have met and had conversations just to understand the iterations of what has occurred in the past. But ultimately, if council wish to move or adopt a new lease arrangement, then that is for council. So I don't understand that officers have offered anything in that regard, because that would be a matter for council, if that's the question that you're asking me.
Go on.
It sort of is, but that answer sounds to me as if there hasn't been a commercial negotiation, a discussion of what we would do. Because there's two issues here. There's an equity of access issue, and then there's a financial issue for the council, and those two things were taken care of by the 2016 resolution. And I'm just wondering whether the administration sees utility in having a conversation to find out what an exclusive use licence might be worth to the City of Subiaco, because how you balance up equity access and financial issues, there's two drivers, and just wondering whether there is value in having that conversation to find out what is the value of the exclusive use licence.
So I haven't been party to any of those conversations or thoughts, so I might hand over to Joel Guest or Hawkins, who am I handing over to? Joel Guest.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor McMullen, over the last couple of weeks, we've had 2 meetings with Mr. Oldfield representing the owners. The last meeting was yesterday, and the Acting Manager of Planning was also present, along with Mr. Oldfield's planning representative. So we've had 2 face-to-face meetings. I've also had multiple telephone discussions, and from those discussions, we have discussed option 2, and I've made it clear to the owners that that would be something for council to resolve, and the fee that staff would recommend for option 2 is outlined in the report. I think we propose about $75,000 to $100,000 based on what we would collect in revenue from ticket machines. When that fee was contained in the report and Mr. Oldfield gave us some feedback on that, my understanding of his feedback was that that fee would not be commercial for him. It was too high. So what I would suggest is, if council is minded to defer this, it would be really helpful for staff if you could articulate what the objective of the deferral is, and if the objective is to work with the owners to negotiate a new exclusive use licence, then we'll take that on board. But in the absence of articulating what the objective of the deferral is, it wouldn't give staff much to proceed with, if that makes sense. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm exercising my option to speak now as the second mover to get on with the debate of this matter, which I believe is really a no-brainer. We don't need to be baffled by talk of receiving legal advice that in fact can be treated quite separately to this item if it is required at all. I also point out that Mr. Oldfield has had a good month to obtain advice on this already, which Councillor Burns himself suggests would only be, a 2-pager. So it's not detailed advice that would be required. Are you right? Should I wait? The other thing is that I believe that the senior manager has answered this very clearly, the questions to Councillor Burns, when he said that there is an agreement, an agreement by conduct, and that has really been substantiated by the fact that a licence fee has been paid.
What's the point of order? Well, you can give a personal explanation if something's been said about you, but I don't think it has, so...
Explanation.
Okay, is there a point of order or a personal explanation?
The explanation's this, right? I mean, words are being put in my mouth by Councillor Stroud, you know what I mean, that I'm not, and I think she's on a very thin line, you know, stepping about to cross a very thin line, talking about, you know what I mean, me being baffled and the things being perfectly clear, that I should fully understand the staff's comments and accept them, right? Unfortunately, it's not Councillor Stroud to be speaking on my behalf as to my interpretations, right?
Okay, so the point that you want to clarify is that you're not baffled.
I'm not baffled, right, at all, and I'd prefer Councillor Stroud spoke about what her interpretations are and not what she suggests. You know what I mean? How I see the matter. Most of the, you know, what I see, what I'm hearing is, you know, I mean, it's obvious. You know, I mean, Councillor Burns has made his point. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yep.
But
Okay. Sure. Okay, look, I didn't hear anything in Councillor Stroud's debate that caused me concern, so where were you up to? Were you just about finished?
No, just started.
Just started. Okay, well, I don't think you've got a full 5 minutes left, but carry on.
It only just started. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor. I said there was no need to be baffled. I wasn't referring specifically to Councillor Burns. However, I did refer to Councillor Burns in asking the senior manager, and where I felt the senior manager had answered quite clearly. Mr. Oldfield has had over a month to obtain advice on this, and I'd also like to point out that I, as a councillor, know a lot of history of this matter, and I'll take you back to 2014, or 1914 actually. 2000, I'll take you back to February 14, where the staff were advising putting in 3 ticket machines with an estimated annual revenue of $75,000. Now, if council had agreed to it back then, they would suggest we would have potentially made an income of $350,000 so far over the 7 years that has been lost. So I'd just like to plant that idea in everybody's mind. It's very clear that option 1 here is the way to go. It increases the supply of parking all day for parking bays. It gives equity of use. We have made a commitment to King Edward and the Niku parking people to do the best we can to provide more parking in the city. We shouldn't show any favouritism to any one commercial operator. As the staff say, the city's ability to manage parking strategically and holistically across the city, and that it is worth an important parking revenue to the city. Mr. Oldfield representing the group, they've had a very good run on this at an extremely cheap rate, and that period of time is now over. We can make a decision on this. We do not need to be complicated by the deed of variance, and I recommend to you that we proceed with the officer recommendation, and that is option 1. Converting the car station number 6 back to a public car park. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no one else that wants to speak, Councillor Hammersley, would you like to close? Make it a quick one, and then Councillor Hammersley will close.
Would I be correct in presuming, well, I believe I'm correct in presuming, but I'd like it confirmed by staff, that at the council meeting held in 2016 in June, I think 21st or 23rd or something, that Councillor Stroud, who attended the meeting, actually voted in favour of the licence. Okay, and to be questioning it now as a bad deal, etc., because the only 2 votes I see against it.
Okay, Councillor Burns, I think your question was, how did Councillor Stroud vote at the meeting back in 2016? I'll hear the question, and then I think we've got to move to Councillor Hammersley to close, please. So if there's staff that can answer that now, let's hear the answer. Otherwise, it can be taken on notice. Okay, the CEO has advised that he doesn't have the minutes with him, and Director of Corporate Services is still looking for them. Yep, okay, we'll take it on notice, and we'll go to Councillor Hammersley to close, please.
Thank you. I think what I was hoping, or what I was wondering whether I would hear when I invited other elected members to convince me not to follow the staff recommendation, was that there was going to be a commitment to ensure that the city was not financially put back by both a deferment, but also, I mean, there had to be a carrot there. There had to be something. But from what I've heard from the staff, just as there was no appetite 2 years ago to pay the commercial rate to compensate the city for the lost revenue, there's no appetite now. And I think in the circumstances where we do have equity issues with access to parking, and we do have needs for revenue, which we raise through parking to assist to build infrastructure in the city, I think I will be supporting the staff recommendation. And as I said, if not now, when? This can't go on forever. And I certainly would have no appetite to offer that car park for $25,000 a year to anybody who came along asking for it. So I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the vote now. Okay, that's been carried 6-3. Okay, there's no other supporters of the arts left in the chamber, so let's go back to C5 and just work through the agenda in the order that the remaining items appear. So C5, of course, is in relation to the draft LDP for the Seddon Street precinct. Is there a mover and a seconder for C5? Is there a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation on C5? Okay, everyone's found the item, and I don't see anyone proposing to move or second the item. So it looks like it's going to lapse for a want of a mover and seconder. That, of course, will bring us to an alternative by Councillor Jennings first, and there's another alternative that's been submitted by Councillor Stroud too. So we'll deal with Councillor Jennings first. We'll have Councillor Jennings moving, presumably, and I'll be looking for a seconder, and we've got Councillor Stroud. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. This is quite a complicated matter. It's been going on for a long time. There's been a lot of consultation and community input, as well as lots of workshops by councillors and a great deal of work by staff. So I'm just going to say thank you to staff for all your hard work on this, it's been a bit of a slog, but I think we're nearly there. So what this comes down to is in August there was a draft LDP put up. Council resolved to have some changes made to that LDP and to bring them back to council. after the relevant studies were done and the amendments could be incorporated into the plan. And so what we've got tonight is attachment 1, and that's that plan or that amended document that Council resolved to have presented to it back in August. Staff's original recommendation was to have an alternative to what I'm now recommending tonight, or what my alternative recommends, and that was something called option 3. Tonight we're looking at what would basically be option 4. So it comes down to, in the end, a couple of basic things between the difference between what staff are recommending and what my alternative recommends tonight. It's hinges mostly on Burleigh Lane and the segment of it between Sagar and the southern extension of Merchant Lane. And staff's preferred position was, or the built form would show that it's going right across the lots from Hay Street, across the lot 500 through to Seddon Street. And what I put up is retaining Burleigh Lane as a throughway or an access way, only one way east, and so that the built form doesn't extend across Burleigh Lane. And the reason I guess that I'm promoting that is the council hasn't made a decision in any substantive way about what happens with Burleigh Lane. Burleigh Lane is a freehold piece of land that the city owns, and it does give the city some strength in, in what can happen in the precinct just by the ownership of that piece of land. I'm concerned that if we allow a built form that extends or shows in the LDP that it extends across Burleigh Lane, this is like an indicative commitment of the city and council that that's the way we'll proceed in future. So I really don't want to give that indication at this point. I think the whole precinct can still work. The movement network works quite well. All the studies have been done which show the individual elements of the movement network in my alternative can work, and it does help to balance the traffic across both sides of the precinct from the east to the west, takes a bit of pressure off Rockaby Road, moves some of the traffic over to the Catherine Street side, and egress and ingress for parking in the future development lots on that side. It also, by keeping Burleigh Lane open, it does provide a flexibility in terms of movement. If something happens elsewhere in the precinct where something happened in Seddon Street or something like that, then we can still move along Burleigh Lane. And there's a few things that I've recommended be adopted or incorporated into the final plan, which is the vehicle access plan, and one of those is taking a couple of things from option 3, which was how the vehicles move across the eastern end of Seddon Street, and the movement from sort of halfway across that eastern end of Seddon Street. It's one way, and they can exit if they want to out of Catherine Street when that proposed laneway is created. I'm aware that there might be some talk of changing the suggested exit direction. I'll be just a couple of sentences. Thank you. The exit direction out of the Catherine Street laneway, I was suggesting that there be no left turn, which would be heading north down Catherine Street, or up. You could.
So just so everyone knows, the beep means you've got 30 seconds left. So yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, so there's that could be changed. I don't think that's any particular very important thing one way or the other. But the rest of it, if anyone's got an appetite to change that, so be it. But the rest of it I would commend. I think it's got flexibility, is not committing the council to a position that we haven't actually worked out that we want to be in terms of closing off Burleigh Lane, and so I'd recommend this alternative. Thanks.
Councillor Stroud.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First, I'd point out that I'm withdrawing my alternative. It was done at a time before I realised that Councillor Jennings had submitted hers. I am very happy to support this. This has been a journey in which I've worked quite closely with Councillor Jennings on, and I appreciate it is very complex, so it's hard to sort of jump in cold if you haven't been going through this over the many months that we have. But it is an excellent alternative. I appreciate that staff, I give absolute respect to their technical approach, but our responsibility really is a strategic vision for this, and that strategic vision rests with, one, protecting the contributory buildings to our heritage precinct. That has been achieved by the first alternative by Councillor Jennings, and now to protect really the city's rights over Burleigh Lane. So I recommend this to you. It seems that we even have stakeholder support by the email that came through today, and I would prefer that we dropped 1A and we didn't restrict by left term into Catherine. You would know by today's very open email communication I did have with Councillor Jennings that I felt that left an option to be able to go left and then right up York Street. So if anybody's in mind now of moving an amendment to put that to a vote to drop 1A, they would certainly have my support. And I recommend this alternative to you, and very much thank Councillor Jennings for her work on this.
Any other speakers? A question, Councillor Powell.
It's a question of Councillor Jennings whether she would be prepared to drop 1A.
Okay. Well, you're going to ask a question before you answer Councillor Powell's question? Okay.
I just wanted to understand, because I didn't have time to refresh my memory today about the arguments about not going down Catherine Street and trying to direct the traffic perhaps down south down Catherine Street, exiting the proposed Catherine Street laneway. So could staff just discuss or advise, what was their rationale for not, or suggesting that traffic exiting out of that new laneway should only turn right? And if that doesn't happen, what other treatments, if they could go left and north, what traffic treatments could be put in place at the junction of, say, Catherine Street and York Street to control, the movement of traffic and limit it a bit going down Catherine Street, perhaps? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. The primary reason for restricting northbound traffic on Catherine Street was to protect the state heritage listed terraces on that street and the other locally listed heritage places on that street. So that was, in general, feedback we received during the consultation process and working with stakeholders for this precinct. We could work on some traffic calming devices. However, given that you're only turning left and it's a short distance, we might be limited in options. So really it was there to protect the residences on that street. The development to the south of York Street is a commercial development, so that's why traffic was designated to move south. However, this is all generally predicated on previous traffic analysis, so that's probably the end of it.
So I suppose the question for Councillors Jennings and Stroud is whether you'll be dropping A or not. Question, Councillor Stroud?
All the vehicles need to be able to do is do a dog leg so they can go up, I think it's a dog leg, so they can go up York. So it is possible to still put a no entry, through you, thank you, Mayor. I mean, it's possible to do a no entry into Catherine just at York Street, so that at least traffic coming out of the LDP and wanting to go up York and travel east can do that. Would I be right in assuming that? And also a local traffic only sign could also be put up to restrict traffic going down Catholic, where you can have local traffic only. Did you guys get that?
Thank you. And through you, Mayor McMullen, the difficulty is that York Street and the intersection there is quite constrained. So a local traffic sign only actually wouldn't achieve, that actually doesn't stop traffic users and trucks and service vehicles, etc., using that, and it could complicate the network and the parking on York Street, which is currently has on-street parking on there. So if we do have large service vehicles and other trucks and so forth in there, they would probably need to go down Catherine Street and turn onto the main street of Roberts Road. So given the dimensions and the nature of parking on York Street, it's very difficult to direct car flows onto there and the wider network.
Thank you. So therefore we could still have the dogleg going up. Through you, thank you, Mayor. Another question. We could still have the dogleg going up York Street and just have no entry into Catherine.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen, I'd say that would be very difficult given the on-street parking on York Street. So you would close it for all traffic and then have to direct all traffic down York Street if that's what your intention is to do. And given the dimensions of the street and the on-street parking there, it may be difficult to have a wide range of vehicles going down York Street. So you would need to either allow vehicles, if they do turn left, they would need a turnaround area to turn around and come back on Hay Street.
Another question, thank you, through you, Mayor. What's this assumption about large vehicles suddenly going up York Street? I mean, York Street has been open for a long time, and Catherine, and there's been no concern up to now. And now there seems to be, just from this local development area, suddenly assuming that there's going to be a lot of traffic coming out of it. So that's the question. Where does that come from?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So when we undertook the traffic analysis, we undertook it for this area to ensure that a range of vehicles could access the area, including normal passenger vehicles, service vehicles, trucks, waste vehicles, etc. There was never any modelling done to have any vehicles go down York Street, which is why it's difficult to consider that at the current moment. And I would say, given the dimensions of the street, it probably wouldn't be, it might not be able to be achieved at this moment. So no traffic modelling has been undertaken to understand if it actually can be used, which is why we have some reservations.
Councillor Jennings, will you be sticking with paragraph A? Okay. Yep, go for it.
But when and if it gets to that, maybe we could do that individually. So council has the choice if, there's an appetite to get rid of it as opposed to doing the whole thing, if that's possible. Thank you.
It is possible. Does anyone else want to speak to the item? No? Okay, well, we've had Councillor Jennings and Councillor Stroud. So, Councillor Jennings, did you want to close? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll break point 1 of the proposed resolution into paragraphs, and we'll vote on A through to G separately. Look, I'm not going to take informal suggestions. I'm just going to propose something. We're going to vote on 1A, and then we're going to vote on 1B through to G, and then we'll vote on 1A, and then we'll vote on everything else. So there'll be 2 votes on this resolution. So that the first vote will be on 1A only, which of course relates to left turn into Catherine Street. So I'm going to call the vote on 1A. Thank you. Okay, that's been carried 5-3. Okay, so now we'll vote on the remainder of the resolution. So this is 1B through to G, and then 2, and then 3 as well. And I'll call the vote on the remainder of the resolution. Thank you. It's carried unanimously. Okay, that brings us to C6, the proposal to amend the level of significance on the heritage list for 139 Coghlan Road. Councillor Hammersley, we've just moved on to C6, and I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor De Vries and Councillor Stroud. Councillor De Vries. Councillor Stroud.
No, I feel there's no need to speak to this. It just had to be brought down because of the disclosures. Thank you, Mayor McMillan.
Okay, no other speakers. Let's call the vote then. That's carried 8-1. The next item is C7, Heritage Grant Applications. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Kosovich and Councillor Stroud. Councillor Kosovich, do you wish to speak to the item? Does anyone wish to speak to the item? No, I'll call the vote. That's carried unanimously. The next item is C8, Scribblers Festival 2022. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor De Vries, Councillor Stroud. Councillor De Vries, do you wish to speak to the item?
It was brought to our attention when we first came on council what a wonderful idea this was, and then due to the COVID events that got delayed, but when it did finally come back, it came back quite quickly, and the community had the benefit of this event being held. And I think while there were not measurable benefits that we measured, I'm sure we'll do that this time, and that's something that I do urge, that we try and sort of see what the benefits are to the wider community as well. It's also, we note that it is a fairly significant funding from the city, which is something that perhaps we can put in our budget for the coming period. Since we've obviously, or perhaps we'll see how we vote tonight on it, but I think it's only going to bring the community people back to Subiaco, and even if it's for a couple of days, I think it's worthwhile, and it supports a lot of our strategic goals for the city, and it does make Subi a really welcoming place. So I do urge councillors to support this, and hopefully we see what those benefits are in an officer's report after the event. That's
Councillor Stroud.
Yes, thank you. This was a no-brainer to me. Last time it was brought to the attention of council, and it is again. It is the only literacy festival in Australia aimed specifically to our children and youth. It attracts over 10,000 visitors, and hopefully we can beef that up again with less threat of COVID and better weather and so on. And it's also a festival that's unique to Western Australia, as the report says. I note some excellent briefing questions were asked, or questions were asked at the briefing forum about measurement, and I welcome that insight from an economic development point of view, and have confidence at this time we can follow that through. So I do recommend this item to you. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other speakers, I suppose that gives Councillor De Vries a chance to close. Okay, I'll call the vote. That's carried unanimously. So that brings us to item C9, which is seeking nominations for the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage Western Suburbs Working Group. And we'll be looking for 2 nominations, a member of that working group and an alternate member of that working group. So before we get into it, I might just ask you, by show of hands, if there's anyone who wants to nominate for the working group. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I do have a question on the confidentiality of the meeting through as suggested in the terms of reference. Does this mean that this is a secret meeting, or does it mean that we just have to be mindful of keeping discussion out of the media? It just wasn't clear to me. Thank you.
Question in front of our planning staff.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor McMullen, Clause 9 of the Terms of Reference, the last sentence is pretty clear in saying that such information is to remain confidential at all times. There's a separate sentence about members of the working group are not authorised to make statements to the media or comment on social media platforms, but the other sentence is pretty clear that it's to remain confidential.
A further question then, that so I assume by that it means that the representative cannot even report back to their council?
Thank you. And through Mayor McMullen, that's something that we would discuss in the first meeting to ensure that that could occur. So it'd be something that you'd ordinarily raise at the meeting to have an understanding that that person or the nominated representative can actually report to council, because that's really important, and whether that confidentiality then would sit with the council as well.
Councillor Burns. Not taking comments at the moment. Is there a question that you want to ask?
My question is, are the councillors or are the staff aware that actually it is actually confidential and falls under the same statutory specifications as joining the Subiaco Land Redevelopment Committee? Once you're in it, right, there is no reporting back at all. You become a member. I mean, this is the absolute case of there is no wearing 2 hats. So if currently the mayor, the deputy mayor and myself are nominated for the Subiaco Land Redevelopment, anything you hear in there, you cannot report back to council whatsoever. And this committee falls in things. So I'd ask, my question is, I would hope that the staff understand that, and perhaps they could acknowledge that they are aware that it is absolutely secret and you really leave your councillor hat at home. And you don't bring your MRA one back in here.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. This is very separate to the Subiaco Land Redevelopment Committee, which is legislated under the Metropolitan Redevelopment Authority Act 2011. So this is a working group formed by the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, and essentially the terms of that working group are set out in the terms of reference. And there is a clause in there about confidentiality, and as I advised before, it would be something that would be discussed at the first meeting, I would say, given that the whole purpose of this group is to assist the state government in informing them about local issues for planning related matters across the western suburbs. So it is separate to the Land Redevelopment Committee. However, there is a term in there regarding confidentiality, and we would hope that that would be discussed in the first meeting.
I might just ask a question first. When is the first meeting, and is there an opportunity to clarify confidentiality before that first meeting?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen, we don't have a time frame for the first meeting, but given we're now at the end of November, I dare say it will be sometime next year, and we can clarify the confidentiality following this council meeting.
Okay, I think Councillor Stroud's foreshadowed a procedural motion, but I'll hear two questions first. We'll go Councillor De Vries and Councillor Hammersley.
Through you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, since there doesn't seem to be any urgency about these meetings, how many would there be every year? I mean, in the next 2 years, how many meetings would you foresee there being? This is through you, Mayor, to whoever can answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. The terms of reference state that the working group will meet as required. So I can't answer on behalf of the state government of when they may set meetings and the number of meetings. Again, hopefully that would be discussed when the group is finally firmed up and what the appetite would be to meet and the number of meetings required.
Councillor Hammersley, then Councillor Burns.
My question is, would it be in order for me to nominate some members, not myself?
I suppose the elected members in question would have to accept the nomination, but that's I see no reason why you can't nominate someone else. Councillor Burns, your question.
My question is the acting planning manager aware that it's actually the state or the department as on behalf of the state's intention to actually disband the group at the end of this year anyway? So I think I suppose I'll just leave it at that. Are you aware that it is the current intention to disband the group at the end of the year?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen, Clause 4 of the Terms of Reference says that the working group has been established for a period of approximately 2 years until 30th of June 2023. We only received the request for nomination following the recent council elections in October.
Okay, look, Councillor Hammersley, ask your question, and then I think we're going to see if there's a seconder for Councillor Stroud's procedural motion.
Mine wasn't a question. I was going to nominate. I would like to nominate yourself and Councillor Stroud as the deputy, given that this is a strategic matter. I think would be very fitting that the mayor, and if the mayor's not available, the deputy mayor attend on behalf of the city. So that would be my request, but obviously you may not have the capacities to do it, but I'll leave that to the two of you to consider.
Okay, if we're voting on the recommendation tonight, it looks like there's going to be 3 nominations. But before we get there, I've got Councillor Stroud wanting to move a procedural motion. Councillor Stroud, if you could perhaps describe what it is and see if there's a seconder for it.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to proceed to 7.11, that the matter be referred to the next council meeting with the intention of clarifying the confidentiality parameters around the meeting, and we might as well just ensure that it isn't going to be cancelled, that the intent is that this meeting is planning to continue. So that would be my terms to refer. Thank you.
Okay. The government's advice is that technically that's not a procedural motion, but what we can do is have yourself, Councillor Stroud, move it from the floor and someone else second it. And based on some advice I received earlier in the meeting, I think that would be in accordance with Rule 2.5. So specifically, it's going to be in accordance with 2.5 sub rule 3. Okay, so the motion needs to lapse and then it will have been dealt with. And if we get that far, then the usual requirement for the giving of notice of a motion won't apply, and we can move something else from the floor. And that something in this case would be your motion, Councillor Stroud. Okay. Do we have a mover and a second? Well, do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation, which at present doesn't have any names inserted? I've got Councillor Burns moving. Is there a seconder? Nope. Okay, it's going to lapse for want of a seconder. Having dealt with that item as it appears on the agenda, we're now at liberty to move something else from the floor, and I'll be looking to Councillor Stroud to move the motion that you've just foreshadowed, but we'll need a seconder before you speak to it. And we've got Councillor Hammersley seconding. So, Councillor Stroud, did you want to speak to your motion?
No, thank you. I'm not too sure what I'm doing. Is the motion to refer? The language in the language in here is refer. Yeah, I'm with it. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry to cut you off. I didn't see you were going to speak, but Councillor Stroud, if you're happy with how the motion's been transcribed on the screen, then please go ahead and speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very happy to move that, and it's pretty clear what the reasons are. Thank you.
Councillor Hammersley? Any speakers to the item? Any other speakers? Nope. Okay. Councillor Stroud, you do have an opportunity to close. You're not going to take it? Okay, I'll call the vote. Okay, that's carried unanimously. And the next item is C20, which relates to the report, the report of the inquiry into the City of Subiaco. And what we're dealing with tonight is the terms of reference for the independent governance review required as a result of the inquiry. So we've got an officer recommendation. Councillor Burns is temporarily leaving the chambers. Yep, okay. Do we have a mover and a seconder for item C20? I think I saw Councillor De Vries and Councillor Kosovich. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, I'll defer my right to speak. Thank you.
Councillor Kosovich. Would anyone like to speak to the item? Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. Just something very brief, just to say, thanks to staff for taking on board our comments and incorporating them into the scope of the review. That was appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Hammersley.
Also, just briefly, I just wanted to record that I will be supporting the staff recommendation and the draft that has been developed. I just wanted to record that just for the purposes of our community, that we're really left with no choice but to do this. It's important that we move through this process and finish it. I think it's a terrible waste of Subiaco's money, but it's the quickest way home, and I think we just get on with it and move forward. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor De Vries, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I look forward to the end of this, and I'm sure that it's going to be a successful review, and knowing the cooperation and the attitude that has prevailed with the new council is fantastic. So I look forward to it, and thank you very much to staff for the work they've done on this already. Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the vote. Okay, that's carried 8-0 with Councillor Burns still temporarily absent from the chamber. Okay, now we're on to elected members' motions, of which previous notice has been given, and there's one here that I submitted, and it relates to the Artists Hub initiative. Now I'm going to do something which I don't think we've seen happen in the last 4 years, and I'm going to step down and let the Deputy Mayor preside for this item, the thinking being that while I'm in the chair I should be facilitating a debate in a objective kind of way, but obviously I can't do that if I'm speaking to this item, so I'll swap seats with you, Councillor Stroud.
Okay, thank you. I assume, Mayor McMullen, you'd like to move your elected member's motion. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Kosovich. Mayor McMullen, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. we've received a bit of background to this initiative courtesy of some of the members of the public gallery this evening, and I won't try to speak to the things that will happen at this hub, because that's something best covered by artists, and whilst what we do here in Chambers might seem like a performance of sorts, it's not really art. So I think it's best, these types of things are best left to arty types. But what I can say is that there seems to be a groundswell of interest in this initiative, and as we've heard tonight, there was apparently 38 artistically minded people who attended a meetup at a local bar, and they're very interested in the idea, and so too an additional 12 people who I understand gave their apologies for the meetup. Now, the thing about the Artists Hub is that it probably means different things to different people, and the sense I get is that it might cater from semi-professional types who need a place to work, right down to people who are a little bit more amateur than that. The point of this motion, though, is simply to request a feasibility report to understand whether this idea has merit and how it might be realised. So that's why there's a number of things which Council would be asking the report to cover, and those things are listed at points A to I of the elected members' motion. We'll be looking for things like possible sites, possible funding sources, possible organisation structures. Basically, all things are on the table at this point, but there's going to be a bit of work to do in terms of our staff liaising with the interested community members, which it appears that the staff have given an undertaking to do if we carry this this motion. If there's anyone here who's a little bit concerned at the level of detail or the breadth of the motion as drafted, I would completely understand why you'd have those concerns. But I suppose the point is it's that there's some things that are probably going to be covered in detail, but other things which might just be covered in passing. For example, we might be asking staff to provide an overview of the arts sector in Subiaco, but I dare say that won't go into chapter and verse. It will just give us enough background information to understand the landscape in which we're working. So in terms of other reasons to support this motion, yes, it will be of value to the artistic people who will use the hub if the idea comes off, but I suppose from my perspective, I'm interested not only in supporting them, but also in supporting an initiative which could potentially have more wider-ranging benefits, and I'm envisaging things like partnerships with universities, for example, who might have art students who will come and use the space. Various uses of the hub which will get people into the hub, get people into the locality, and perhaps they'll buy coffees and support some businesses while they're here, and at the same time create a bit of vibrancy around the hub wherever the hub might be. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At the moment, we're just looking for a preliminary report on feasibility. So I hope Council can see fit to support the motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Hammersley, would you like to speak to the item? Question? Yes, sure.
Just picking up on Mayor McMullen's question about whether people were concerned. I guess I did have, I'm generally supportive, but I just had a couple of questions because the devil's often in the detail with these things. So am I right in assuming that what we're talking about here is visual arts? So not the arts. So we're not talking about theatre, opera, singing, music, we're really talking here about painting, sculpture, and all those sorts of actual visual arts. Can I just clarify?
I think that might be a question for me. Yeah, that's my understanding of what's being proposed. So it might be appropriate with the support of the seconder that we amend A, for example, and strike out the words performers and any other words that give councillors cause for concern at the scope of what we're talking about. But I think it's really just that word performers that gets us into that territory which maybe we don't want to go.
Yes, we just had a question. Thanks, Councillor Powell. So we'll settle with answering that question first, and then my apologies, Councillor Kosovic, you haven't had a chance to speak to the item yet. So the answer to the question was really whether we would amend that item. So perhaps the council will just take that on board at the moment. Anyone's interested in amending, and we might have a little bit more of a debate on that item. From the CEO, thank you.
Perhaps if I could, through the chair, what may be helpful or may not be, hopefully it is helpful, is if council were to vote and adopt this as a resolution, one of the ways that we would try and ascertain, in addition to talking to the community members, but would also be a workshop with strategic type workshop with council to understand the scope. As you heard today, there was a number of members that spoke, start small and those sorts of things. So I imagine if council were to resolve this, that ordinarily we'd have a strategic workshop with councillors to try and understand the scope. So therefore, I suppose it may not be necessary to narrow down the words at this stage. Just a suggestion.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kosovic.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to give my strong support to it. I think it's a very worthy initiative, and I think that getting support by council is a really good start. However, the weight of expectation that's created by a very excited group, and the performing arts side of it will have an expectation that they will be catered for in this. I think the CEO's recommendation that it go to a workshop is the right way to go. I think it's going to give you a chance to hone in that expectation, and perhaps as I've talked to you, I think just not too long ago, about the idea of that if we could even hone it in and suggest that we go in stages, like that the performing arts side know that we possibly, when we get to there, we can then progress it stage by stage, so that you just rein it in, because I think you've got a very excited community, as I've said, and I think we just need to make sure that we don't over-promise and under-deliver. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Powell, and then Councillor, I'm sorry, I've got a mental blank tonight. Councillor White, thank you, can follow, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is really a question for the Mayor. Is a hub a location, a spot, or is it a concept?
I understand a hub to be a place, a physical location. Whether it's one location or it moves from empty premises to empty premises, I suppose might be one of the things that staff consider and report to us on. But the hub's not so much an intangible idea as it is a physical place that artists would work and potentially sell some of their wares out of as well.
I want to just question the fear of scope. I think as a preliminary report, it's important to go broad. And my sense is the importance of 1A is that we're getting an idea of who's out there and what their needs are. And we might make the assumption that performing arts are already served. But we won't know until we ask the question. And I think there's also a lot of cross-fertilisation between various modalities of art. And I would even argue against, I like the idea of a hub being a single premise, but I could imagine 4 or 5 hubs, not necessarily each funded singularly by the council, but activity centres almost across a hub which is Subiaco. Again, I'm not trying to shape that in any way now, but just to say, if we go into this as a preliminary approach with a broad scope, understanding who's out there, what they want, it would seem to me then we could start shaping it up. Now, I'm not sure whether I need to put that as a question or that's a statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor De Vries.
I would like to support this, but I also have a question. So this is through you, presiding member, regarding the length of time that we're considering, and it may be a question for the CEO, but I mean, we would envisage that we would want something off the ground fairly quickly because the energy and passion is there, as we heard tonight. Would you be able to give me any idea about the kind of time frame before we meet and discuss what would generally for these sort of completely new projects, what would it be? A year, 6 months, that sort of thing? Thank you.
If I could, through the chair. So at this point in time, we haven't determined the exact schedule for next year. So there is another strategic workshop for councillors to work through and articulate a priority for things to be considered in the upcoming year, like a calendar. So this, if assuming this was to proceed, this would form part of that. We just about run out of dates for the end of this calendar year, so ordinarily I would imagine it would commence sometime in February, March in terms of councillors getting together to consider this matter, and as has been said, they can be very broad in scope, but it would be helpful in that first session to try and understand councillors' needs in terms of the information that may be helpful in terms of that preliminary report on the feasibility. So I'm not sure that answered your question, but the intention would be sometime in the new year, I'd imagine.
And just a follow-up question. Obviously, there was some quite strong leadership from the community to get this idea underway. Would we be inviting those sort of quasi-leaders to be part of a working group as a suggestion to getting this off the ground? Thank you.
If I can, through the chair, I think it's always good to have a resolution first, and then what we'll be in a position to do, I think the ordinarily would be first is sit down and have the strategic workshop with council to determine exactly what was intended in terms of being able to provide a preliminary report, and in that process we're then able to determine the scope of the engagement that council seek, and that would then flow through to the time that we would take to be able to prepare that preliminary report.
Yeah, no more questions. Yeah, I'm just supporting this. I think that the passion is there. The community spoke and they certainly came here tonight with their great ideas, and I think where possible we should be building community, and that's what we're also about. We're about supporting the voice of community and promoting local interests where we can, and I think this is going to be a winner for so many people, but it may take a little bit of work to get it going, but I'm sure with the will of council and the support of the administration that we'll be able to get there. So I commend this to you all.
Thank you, Councillor De Vries. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I did pick up on the word, I think from Councillor Kosovic, about anticipation, which is probably the biggest problem we've got. And I'm not asking to change anything or anything else. I absolutely support this, but the only thing I might ask everybody just to even mentally take on board is probably the quickest way to do it is to start it as small as possible. You start it small quick, and but in a situation where it can grow, as opposed to trying to build something that, the bigger it is, the longer it's going to take. So something that can get legs under it, and then just, because I think also, this is not really our area, unless there's an artist in the room. Sorry, and if there is, I apologise. I actually paid myself oils, thank you, but I'm not going to go to the hub. I'm quite happy. What's that? Have it just bring one in, and you can disclose your opinion. I suppose to sum it up, what I'm saying is, I think something like this, because of the nature of the people behind it and their enthusiasm, not only is it quicker to grow it smaller, but it actually then develops a life of its own. They grow it, right? And as I think the CEO was saying, whether it's one location or it's multiple locations, or perhaps it was, sorry, it might have been you, David, the multiple locations or whatever, I think they'll determine, sorry, Simon, okay, whatever. They determine. I think it's a natural sort of thing that I think if we're too specific about it, and again, these are just ideas, not trying to anything that I'm trying to put in there as a into your thing. It's just things to think about, but before we get meeting and talking about it.
Can I just ask?
Yes, sure.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Is there not enough direction in the wording of the elected members' motion for our staff with all their knowledge of, I suppose, the community and getting new projects off the ground, to go out and liaise with some representatives of the local arts community, and based on that information come to us with a preliminary report? I'm just a little bit concerned about workshopping something which we don't really know a lot about, only to then send staff away to work on a preliminary report. I suppose when I prepared this, I hoped that this would be the direction that staff would need to go out and gather information and provide us a preliminary report, which is going to be by no means final, but might give us something to then workshop. I'd be interested to know the staff view on that, please.
Perhaps I could, through the chair. I suppose the reason why a strategic workshop is helpful is because even with the speakers that were here tonight, when they articulate elements, they use different phrases. So, for example, some used equivalent to a men's shed, and that is quite a different arts hub to, say, other arts hubs that are across Perth and across the world, I suppose. So the reason why we would seek a little bit more guidance is around what the intention is. So we've heard from the public in today from just one part of the community, but there would certainly be other parts of the community that have not come along today. And so the question for council would be, do you wish to start small and for us to provide context and opportunities, etc., around that, I suppose that more, and I don't wish to use the word amateur, but more social element in relation to the arts? Or is there also an appetite for a broader conversation in that terms of that preliminary report to explore the other elements? And there's digital art, there's a whole range of other arts. So I think it would be worthwhile, even though there is sufficient information, but for us to produce a preliminary report, there's many elements of art. So if you wish to start small, that's if there's a narrower scope in that, then we can do that bit of work first, and that could come back much quicker. If there's a broader, I suppose, appreciation of the words that are contained within that resolution, then there would be more research that would be required to make sure that we didn't, I suppose, leave any particular element out that currently may well exist within the community that we just haven't heard of yet.
Thank you. I'll use 4.7 and 4.8 to speak to this item. What I heard tonight from the gallery and what I've heard from various members of the community contacting me is the words organic, that this happened organically, that it was along the men's shed line, that it involved a visual arts focus. That's what the information that I believe we received tonight and that I've received. My concern is that we can already hear from the conversation tonight, by council getting involved and the city, we're complicating it. I'd actually prefer to see, because if you think about it, if we ever applied this approach to the men's shed, the men's shed would never have got off the ground. So I would have preferred that we actually gave them a space free of rent for 6 months, these leaders, to let the community then work out what they really want and to put a proposal to them to start working in this space and gathering the people around them to see who's interested in what they want to bring to it and so on, and let it evolve that way. My concern with 1A of an overview of the arts sector, all I can see that the city could capture in that is the professional people, the commercial artists and professional, because it says estimate number of artists and cultural workers, performers and businesses. How would the city possibly capture the home industry at all? Who's doing watercolours in their backyard, or a little bit of pottery or silver work and so on? We're not capable of capturing any of that. That's why I'd really prefer to hand this first to the community, give them a space to work from, and let it evolve naturally, then let them come to us for the support that they may need to develop it up. So that's why I suppose I would prefer that we actually now refer to this to a workshop, just to explore that idea, explore it with the community members who have come and spoken to us tonight, and then work up the way forward. And perhaps for that workshop too, the staff can indicate whether the city actually has any spaces available that we could pretty quickly start on and provide. I've got one in mind, but whether it's under lease at the moment is another issue. So that's my suggestion tonight, and I'll leave that in your camp to consider, and that is to refer the item to a workshop. We probably couldn't do that before December unless we can add it on to one of our strategic workshops. That's possible. Otherwise, it would have to come back in February. I'll leave that with you. Councillor Hammersley? No? Sorry? Yeah? Sure. Councillor Kosovic, you have a question.
Successful artist hubs across the metro area, look at best practice, what's worked. Again, that weight of expectation, honing it in, I think that'll be easier for staff, personally. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you. Yes, I hope we are going to pass a motion, because I would like to see this start, because, you know, the wheels of government do grind quite slowly, and we need, if we get started, at least next year we might start moving somewhere. I am anxious about this one spinning out into a great big black hole, because it's pretty vague. And that doesn't help the staff. And, you know, we've seen situations before where council hasn't been able to express itself clearly enough, and things go off into the ether. People struggle. They feel, no doubt, it's hard when you don't really know what someone wants to know where to begin and end. As I said before, the devil in the detail. I mean, what is a preliminary report? It's a pretty broad spectrum. I would hope that it would be very preliminary, just quickly gathering together what we do know, put markers in of what we don't know, but yes, try and get something happening. Not too much haste, but we don't want this to go off for a year while we all gather a whole lot of information and then don't do anything. So that's my anxiety, which is why I asked, what arts, because that's a big spectrum. And what is a preliminary report? I hope even by us all just speaking tonight, we're at least giving out some signals that help the staff understand. And I think we are going to have to end up in a workshop. It's a little bit chicken and the egg though. Do we need a little bit of a report so that we can come to the workshop and actually contribute something? Or do we have to go to the workshop? Yeah, I'm not quite sure. And we might have to handball that problem to the CEO.
I had a question too. I understand from conversations that I've had there isn't the intent to go to consultants at this stage. Can I have that confirmed by staff, please? I'd hate money wasted on consultants that could have paid for a kiln or 6 months' rent in the meantime. Thank you.
So the way I understood what we would do is we'd get together the brightest minds that we already have working with the city and have some conversations with some of the people that have already tried to describe, and then we'd have put that information as best as we could to you in a strategic workshop, and that would guide yourselves on whether or not that was preliminary enough or whether you wish to have a deeper dive in a particular area. So that could give us the insight as to whether the information that we currently contain and we were able to put together, because there has been quite a bit of work in the past, particularly the social infrastructure and those types of other elements that we would be able to bring to you. Plus, as others have said tonight, that there are people in the community that were willing to provide us information. So that would be the sort of guide to assist, the way I see it, to assist council as to, do we have enough information or then be in a position that to say, yes, that report's sufficient for us to, I don't know, by way of example, let's start and do one thing small, which may be the equivalent of a men's shed, but for the arts, and then that might be enough for you to say we'd like to proceed on that basis because we've got enough information, or alternatively, council may resolve to do something different. But we would get feedback in terms of the information that we had. Was that sufficient for council to consider that to be a preliminary report that's on feasibility?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Burns.
By way of a question, and perhaps might help us get us out of this, through you, could we do this instead? We've already sort of got in trouble, I mean, this is just getting, I think we'd be here all night, and I forget the words, the devil's in the detail, as Councillor Hamsley said, but if we reversed it and just put it back, there's obviously a small group that's leading this, right? And if we reversed it and asked them to put it to us in writing, what their expectations are, what they think their numbers are, what they think they need. Well, actually, we achieve a couple of things. One, we find out from them. Two, it starts immediately. We're not saying, okay, well, this is a great idea, we'll get back to you in March and we'll have a forum. This way, put them to work on getting, we pose the question to them, all right, we like it, but you gotta give us more information or otherwise we're just going to be discussing a whole bunch of stuff that arguably you don't want, okay? So that, and if that also says you've got to form a group, you know what I mean? We want to know who's your chairman and who's on the main committee and how many members you've got, whatever. Do you have a group? You know what I mean? Whatever. Throw it to them and it starts immediately. And also, we'll get back the information, but they know each other. We don't need to, whoever suggested, sorry, Deputy Mayor, it was you the silversmith in their backyard. How are we going to find them? Well, arguably the silversmith will know these people, okay? So why don't we just do that? Why don't we just toss it back at them and say, we're for, you know what I mean? It generally has our support. We like the idea, but we're not quite there on what the hell you want. Sorry to say hell.
Thank you. And I believe actually, thank you Councillor Burns for that suggestion, and in actual fact that has already partly been done by one of the community members who put quite a good business plan, etc. together. So yeah, so it's not a difficult request, because I believe that probably could be expanded now that the group has grown a bit as well. So so that is certainly a possibility. Thank you. Councillor White, thank you.
I feel like I have a confession to make, because for me it's possibly a misinterpretation of the motion, which I really support, whether it's in the what I would call a smaller, start small, grow process, or how I originally thought it. Because it seems to me, if you are looking at the men's shed model, you're looking at a community organisation of artists, and we saw some tonight, very passionate, who might form an incorporated association and might come asking for grant money to do something like an arts men's shed, men's and women's shed for arts. And that's great. That's not what I thought when I saw this. I thought this was, what can we do to make Subiaco the centre for arts and culture in Western Australia? And that would be much bigger than just a building. It would include one, but it would be much, much more. It would be, how do you create an enabling conditions for people to trial out new art, to have, you know, for the council to have an artist in residence who comes here and does portraits of all the stuff, or has, you know, storytellers or writers in different businesses, or all these poetry sessions wherever, all these kinds of things, which is a hub of activity of different sorts, some big, some small. And that's an entirely different model. So I confess that I could be trying to hijack this with that broader, let's make the right conditions for people who are artistic and want to bring culture, including Indigenous culture, much more strongly into the life and business of Subi. But the other way is completely legitimate, which is to say, let's have a community organisation, an incorporated association form, which has a men's and women's arts shed, and grows from there. And so, yeah, my apologies for maybe misconstruing the member's motion.
Thank you, Councillor White, and very good. I have a question actually to follow up on that, because we do have the Subiaco Arts Centre, which has been under lease to the Perth Theatre Trust for some time now. The reason for that is because the state government poured millions of dollars into that building to renovate it and refurbish and make it useful as an arts centre. But I also understand that lease is now starting to run down. So my question to the staff is, do we know how many more years on that lease? Because I can see this sort of ambition that you expressed tonight, Councillor White, could very much be tied around that Subiaco Arts Centre. So my question is, do we know how long the lease is on the Subiaco Arts Centre to the Perth Theatre Trust? Thank you. And whether we would have the option, once that lease runs out, for that building to come back to the city of Subiaco. Thank you.
I think the answer is 2027, but it might, is that right? Yeah, I think it's 2027, but they may wish to, and perhaps probably just add more broadly, I'm a big fan of the word and so what may well happen with this workshop, etc., is exactly what you've described, Councillor Burns, and exactly what you've described, in that the preliminary report may go, well, we've got enough here to progress this particular aspect of the men's, women's and everybody else's art type hub. And we've also got a little bit of understanding about this broader picture that over time you'd like to explore further. So it may well be that that preliminary report deals with both of those things, but just does not have the full information relating to the other elements. But yes, we certainly do have that in 2027, and all of the social infrastructure work that was done, I think this year or last year, this year I think, that would feed into this process.
Thank you. Well, that's promoted a very interesting discussion, and it seems like we've landed back to the Mayor's elected members motion, which is going to, I believe the staff have absorbed a lot of information and direction tonight, that we may well achieve two outcomes on this, as expressed by councillors. Yes, Councillor Powell, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like an opportunity to speak as well, if I can. Look, I think it's quite clear that there's support for there to be an artist's hub here. I think almost some of those questions almost going back to the start. Is it a concept, where we bring artists in, or is it a spot? Is it a location? I think there's also an argument about whether it's organic and whether it comes from the community, and then we ask, then the community tell us what they want, which is bottom up, or whether this becomes a top down. We tell them what we can do for them, and I think we've really got to decide on that as well. I think the motion is quite good, but I think the overall indication here, or the feeling I get tonight, is that it's not required for a really deep dive to get the answers to those questions. That some sort of speed or alacrity, with not going into them really deeply each one, and you could spend an awful amount of time, I think, on each one of those. But I think not a deep dive, a kind of shallow dive, and then back with whether it's going to be organic or whether it's going to be top down. That's my view, but I'll support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. I have another question to the staff. Are they comfortable now that they've got enough message and direction from council? And when do they think they could bring this back to council? Is their intention, and do they need it to be added to the motion? Is their intention to get this information and then bring it to a workshop, or to bring it back to council?
My intention was to bring it to a workshop, but unless council instructs me to do something different, that's what I had hoped we would do.
And when?
As soon as practical, but I would think that would be in the early part of, so in other words, February 2022, because there's a bit of information to gather, and we're running out of days by which we can meet.
Can always have a January special council meeting. Have we exhausted? Excuse me. Yes.
Just if I could on that, it's always ideal if staff can have a break over the Christmas period. It's been a big year, but there would be a little bit of work to do in preparation to make sure that council had a good strategic workshop and there was sufficient information for the new be in a position to know actually that's enough of what we need for that preliminary report that we could then put to council.
So thank you. Don't worry, I was joking. But so I can see probably a workshop would be planned in February, and then it would come back to council in some form of decision following February to March or April. So that's sort of the timing if the community is listening in to us tonight. Do we have any more comment or questions on this item? And if not, Councillor McMullen, would you like to close your elected members' motion? Thank you.
Thanks everyone for the debate tonight. I think what it shows is that that the Artists Hub means different things to different people on council, and no doubt we'll find out pretty quickly that it also means different things to the arts community in Subiaco. I am, however, confident that once staff go out and start speaking with some of the leaders within that part of our community, we'll know pretty quickly the types of models which I think these arty types have in mind for this hub, and some of the things which I hope the preliminary report will cover will be relatively easily answered. But I don't think there's much else to say. It looks like we've got a pretty clear way forward in that if this gets passed, that the staff will go out and speak with relevant members of the community and then have a preliminary report to bring to a workshop, after which time they'll then prepare their preliminary report to submit to council. And look, I think this will all come out in the wash when we start working on our calendar of workshop topics. I think that's probably the point at which things will really crystallise and we'll have a better idea of timing. But for now, I'd commend the motion to you, obviously, and I'd hope it's got everyone's support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMullen. Now, we actually have to swap our voting so that I'm not voting on your behalf. Thank you, councillors. We'll put this to the vote. That's a unanimous decision. Congratulations, Councillor Mayor McMullen, on your first unanimous elected members' motion.
All right, that brings us to new business of an urgent nature, and Councillor De Vries has submitted something which missed the deadline for elected members' motions, but which I'm prepared to approve for consideration tonight, and this relates to the time frame for responses to the proposed changes to the Local Government Act, but perhaps governance staff can get up the wording of the motion, and then we can let Councillor De Vries see if there's a seconder for the motion. Okay, we've got Councillor De Vries moving, Councillor Stroud seconding, and we're dealing with the urgent business tonight, so please go ahead and speak to the item, Councillor De Vries.
A couple of simple typographical errors, if I could just correct them and also make a couple of changes as well. So it's obviously to the Minister for Local Government in the first line. So obviously that's just the date for the wording of the point 1 should provide to request an extension to provide a submission regarding the proposed. So that's in, to provide a submission to the proposed local government reforms. And I'd also like to change the date of the letter, because I'm aware that that may be too short a time frame, and I'd just like to question through you Mayor McMullen to the CEO whether Monday, the 29th of November, is a date that would align with your availability to provide information or, provide feedback on a letter, or does the date of Friday the 26th look agreeable to you? Either way?
Through the chair, apologies. That would be fine. I was actually just Googling the Right Honourable John Kerry's proper title. That was all that I was wishing to adjust, which is Minister for Housing, local government. If we could adjust that. Yeah. But as to the date, it's fine.
Okay, so thank you for that amendment. I think it's pretty clear that the time frame that's been given to all local governments and everybody who wants to give a submission is quite short, but particularly for local governments. We got the opportunity to start responding, I believe it was a few weeks back now, and that effectively leaves 2 months where we're supposed to come up with a decision. Councils can talk about it, maybe have an informal discussion, then bring it back to an ordinary council meeting to agree upon some feedback. And I think we all know that that's just not going to happen. So I think at the Central Zone meeting, other councils have similar concerns and have either contacted or sending similar letters. I can't speak for all councils, but certainly there is an appetite to ask for an extension from the Central Zone councils. It makes perfect sense that we don't have another special council meeting in January. I'm sure everybody needs a break. So when would we have a chance to meet to discuss these proposed reforms? I doubt there is any time. Asking the Minister for a 1-month extension would enable us to bring this back to, God forbid, yet another strategic workshop to discuss it, or an informal meeting, but then it could come to an ordinary council meeting in February. I think it's a very minimal extension of time. I do trust that the CEO and the Mayor would come up with the perfect wording for that, because it is an expectation when there's so many significant changes being proposed that we give it the level of gravitas that's required. I don't think it's something that we can just assume is all good, but a lot of it will be fantastic, and we can give positive feedback and also give critical feedback. And I think that is our role as decision makers, and we're encouraged to be critical thinkers and to exercise our judgment. So if we can't exercise our judgment, and this consultation process should enable us to exercise our judgment really carefully, I think it's actually beholden on us to request of the Minister and politely that extension is granted. And this also enables us to really fully weigh the kind of changes that that are being proposed, not only by the Minister, but his advisors have come up with a swathe of quite involved changes. So I'm really hoping that letter is quite unequivocal in how it expresses itself, and that it obviously, if it could be signed by both the CEO and the Mayor, because that gives some weight to it. I don't believe there's any time for us to come back and give approval to that letter, and I fully trust that that will be all in order. So I think my reasons are laid out fairly clearly. It would be also good that these views of councils could be shared at the Walga Central Metropolitan Zone meetings, so that coordinates a broader response. That's a separate response, but certainly from the discussion that we held last week, it was clear that there had been discussions going on in other councils already. So, yeah, they're my reasons. I just hope that this is pretty straightforward. I don't need to talk about it again, but I hope I have your support for this tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Stroud. Councillor Jennings.
I just wanted to ask a question or make a suggestion about the wording, if you'll take that on board, Councillor De Vries, if you think it's valid. to provide a submission regarding the proposed.
Yes, I was. Sorry, I did think I'd read that. I fully do. Actually, I did read it, but perhaps too quickly, and I didn't double check. Yes, to provide a submission regarding the proposed. Correct. That is the correct. Thank you.
Councillor Powell, question?
Yes, it's a report brought back to the council before this. Does the council then need to consider a report, perhaps from the officers, that we're going to provide to Walga? So does it really need a point 5? So where does the information go to, or when we get the, if we get the, yeah, how, yes, so, through you, Mayor, could staff provide some advice whether that might be required?
I'm not understanding the question. If staff are able to answer it, then I'll defer to the CEO.
I think, as I understand the question, is so let's say you're questioning the practical. So we write a letter to the minister that says we want an extension, and which we may not hear back on. Is that the question you're asking? And then how do we make a submission, because council should resolve to make that decision?
Yeah, well, how do we make our submission? So we're asking for.
So I think that's the practical next step. So ordinarily what we would do is we would put a report to council which would contain the information that we would make in a submission to the minister. This is just requesting that the minister grant us an extension to provide that submission at a later date, given that most local governments don't have meetings in January.
So I suppose trying to ask, is that then implicit that there will be a report to council which will then be forwarded to the minister? If it's approved by council.
Ordinarily, council should resolve to make the submission on what is called sweeping reforms of the Local Government Act that represent the largest change in more than 25 years, according to the minister. So it would make sense that, as I said, a report at some point in time, and if it's to meet the current deadline, would have to come to the next council meeting for council resolve to make that submission, unless you wish to do it some other way, but that's ordinarily how it would work.
No other speakers? Councillor De Vries, did you want to close?
Just as further clarification, the deadline currently is the 4th of February, and there is a request that it be extended to the 5th of March, which is also in line with the Central Zone request. So I feel that is a fairly consistent sort of 1 4-week period. So that's just to clarify that. Thank you.
So you're not going to close? Or
Yeah, that is
close? Okay. Okay, I'll call the vote. That's carried unanimously. Now we've got no confidential items to deal with behind closed doors tonight, so it looks like we've got through all the business on the agenda. So I declare the City of Subiaco Ordinary Council meeting of the 23rd of November 2021 closed at 8:51 p.m. Thank you, everyone.